guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Delyash React Talk. I'm excited and happy returning back to you. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel, like and share. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always coming back. So guys, today I'm checking out a response to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Please don't mind my pronunciation, okay guys? Can't wait to dive and see what this is all about. Yeah, so let's go there.
Hello everybody.
Hi Arnold. In my response to you, I'm going to prove one of two things. Either you know nothing about the conflict in Ukraine, or you are a lying hypocrite. Now, I'm not an ex-governor, I don't have any contacts in the Western mainstream media, so I suggest that everyone shares this video everywhere, so that the Terminator may actually see it.
I'm speaking to you today because there are things that are going on in the world that are being kept from you. Terrible things that you should know about.
Funny you should say that. Guess what, Arnold? There are terrible things that are being kept from you that you should know about. But please go on.
But before I talk about the harsh realities, let me just tell you about the Russian who became my hero.
Okay.
In 1961, when I was 14 years old, a very good friend of mine invited me to come to Vienna and to watch the World Weightlifting Championships.
Ah, I see you're trying to establish an emotional connection with us. You were 14 and you got to meet a Russian weightlifter. That's fantastic. You obviously lived till you were 14, but guess who didn't though? Polina Sladkaya, 6 years old. Arseniy Danchenko, 5 years old. Anna Kostenko, 2 years old. Dasha Barilova, 8 years old. Serezha Pivin, 6 years old.
Wow.
Sonichka Martinyuk, 4 years old.
Wow.
This whole family and their kids. Karina Bilanov, 9 years old.
Wow.
They didn't get to see 14, Arnold, because of the Ukrainian army and the national battalions. Now, there are 160 kids and teens on that list, Arnold. Did you make a heart-wrenching video about them? Well, I couldn't find one. Now, there's another video that a Russian weightlifter made for you. A young girl. She sent you letters with those kids. Did you respond? Apparently you didn't. But now you made this video against this war. Now, 8 years too late. But let's take a look at which wars you supported, Arnold.
Okay.
The Iraq War. The muscle man who rose to Hollywood fame as the Terminator came to the site of America's bloodiest war in a generation to cheer up troops. Not only did you support it, but you also vetoed a bill that would have allowed Californians to vote on whether they favor an immediate withdrawal of US troops from Iraq. Huh, that's interesting. Now, which warmongers did you support? Schwarzenegger praises Bush for handling of war on terror. Arnold Schwarzenegger, David Cameron's secret weapon over Libya. But wait, there's more. You endorsed John McCain. You know, this guy.
That old Beach Boys song, Mama Ran.
When I search John McCain on YouTube, the biggest thing that comes up is you singing Bomb, 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 Iran. 744,000 hits in case you haven't checked it recently. Are you proud or embarrassed of that?
I'm proud.
The free world is with you. America is with you. I am with you.
Huh, I guess remembering useless information is not so useless.
My connections to Russia didn't stop there, by the way. Oh, it actually deepened when I traveled there with bodybuilding and for my movies and met all my Russian fans.
Guess what, Arnold? With your virtue signaling video, you reduced your fans in Russia. But you know where you should have traveled to? The Donbass. The place which was constantly shelled and bombarded for 8 years by the Ukrainian army.
No one likes to hear something critical of the government, I understand that. But as a longtime friend of the Russian people, I hope that you will hear what I have to say. And may I remind you that I speak with the same heartfelt concern as I spoke to the American people when there was an attempted insurrection on January 6th last year, when a wild crowd was storming the US Capitol, trying to overthrow our government.
But did you speak out against the peaceful demonstrators in Ukraine who peacefully overthrew their government in 2014?
Whoa.
I didn't think so, Arnold.
I know that your government has told you that this is a war to denazify Ukraine. Denazify Ukraine. This is not true. Ukraine is a country with a Jewish president, I might add, whose father's 3 brothers were all murdered by the Nazis.
Obama is black, Arnold. That didn't stop racism in the US, now did it? You may say, well, that the KKK are not an official part of the American government. That's true, but the neo-Nazi battalion Azov are officially part of the Ukrainian armed forces. Do you see the difference here by any chance?
You see, Ukraine did not start this war. Neither did nationalists or Nazis. Those in power in the Kremlin started this war.
In Russia, we have this allergy towards anything neo-Nazi. Do I have to explain why? I mean, I'll share a story from my family. My grandmother's family was shot point blank by your people in World War II. In Ukraine, in Dnipropetrovsk, one of my grandmother's relatives had to hide in a bag of potatoes from your people, Arnold. Oh, and regarding the Nazis, let me read to you a lengthy article from The Nation, an American publication where Lev Galinkin, a Ukrainian American born in Kharkov, can enlighten you just a little bit. Neo-Nazis and the far right are on the march in Ukraine. 5 years after the Maidan uprising, anti-Semitism and fascist-inflicted ultranationalism are rampant. 5 years ago, Ukraine's Maidan uprising ousted President Viktor Yanukovych to the cheers and support of the West. Politicians and analysts in the United States and Europe not only celebrated the uprising as a triumph of democracy, but denied reports of Maidan's ultranationalism, smearing those who warned about the dark side of the uprising as Moscow puppets and useful idiots. Freedom was on the march in Ukraine. Today, increasing reports of far-right violence, ultranationalism, and erosion of basic freedoms are giving the lie to the West's initial euphoria. There are neo-Nazi pogroms against the Roma, rampant attacks on feminists and LGBT groups, book bans, and state-sponsored glorification of Nazi collaborators. These stories of Ukraine's dark nationalism aren't coming out of Moscow. They're being filed by Western media, including US-funded Radio Free Europe, Jewish organizations like the Jewish World Congress and Simon Wiezel Center, and watchdogs like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Freedom House, which issued a joint report warning that Kiev is losing the monopoly on the use of force in the country as far-right gangs operate with impunity. The DC establishment's standard defense of Kiev is to point out to the Ukraine's far-right as a smaller percentage of seats in the parliament than their counterparts in places like France. That's a spurious argument. What Ukraine's far-right lacks in the polls, it makes up for the things Marine Le Pen could only dream of: paramilitary units and free reign on the streets. Post-Maidan Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces. The Azov battalion was initially formed out of a neo-Nazi gang, Patriot of Ukraine. Andriy Beletsky, the gang's leader who became Azov's commander, once wrote that Ukraine's mission is to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Beletsky is now a deputy in Ukraine's parliament. In the fall of 2014, Azov, which was accused of human rights violations, including torture by Human Rights Watch and the United Nations, was incorporated into Ukraine's National Guard. In January 2018, Azov rolled out its National Druzhina street patrol, whose members swore personal fealty to Beletsky and pledged to restore Ukrainian order to the streets. The Druzhina quickly distinguished itself by carrying out pogroms against the Roma and the LGBT organization and storming municipal council. Earlier this year, Kiev announced that the neo-Nazi unit will be monitoring polls in the next month's presidential election. Azov isn't the only far-right formation to get Western affirmation. In December 2014, Amnesty International accused the Dnipro 1 battalion of potential war crimes, including using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. 6 months later, Senator John McCain visited and praised the battalion. Speaker of Parliament Andrei Parubiy co-founded and led two neo-Nazi organizations, the Social National Party of Ukraine, later renamed Svoboda, and Patriot of Ukraine, whose members would eventually form the core of Azov. Although Parubiy left the far right in the early 2000s, he hasn't rejected his past. When asked about it in a 2016 interview, Parubiy replied that his values haven't changed. Parubiy, whose autobiography shows him marching with the neo-Nazi Wolfsangel symbol used by Aryan nations, regularly meets with Washington think tanks and politicians. His neo-Nazi background is ignored and outright denied. Even more disturbing is the far right's penetration of law enforcement. Shortly after Maidan, the U.S.
Guys, please pardon me on this. I really thank God I came across this information. But all we want is peace between these two. That's just it. Putting faults on people won't help anything. Guys, we just need peace. We want peace. It's peace we want, because killing people is not the solution. It's painful because the people that are being consumed by this war are innocent. Guys, let's dive to see more.
equipped and trained the newly formed national police in what was intended to be a hallmark program buttressing Ukrainian democracy. The Deputy Minister of the Interior, which controls the national police, is Vadim Troyan, a veteran of the Azov and patriot of Ukraine. In 2014, when Troyan was being considered for the chief of police, Ukrainian Jewish leaders were appalled by his neo-Nazi background. Today, he's a deputy of the department running US-trained law enforcement in the entire nation. Earlier this month, RFE reported on national police leadership admiring Stepan Bandera, a Nazi collaborator and fascist whose troops participated in the Holocaust, on social media. The fact that Ukraine's police is peppered with far-right supporters explains why neo-Nazis operate with impunity on the streets. It's not just the military and street gangs. Ukraine's far-right has successfully hijacked the post-Maidan government to impose an intolerant and ultra-nationalist culture over the land. In 2015, the Ukrainian parliament passed legislation making two World War II paramilitaries, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, heroes of Ukraine, and made it a criminal offense to deny their heroism. The UN had collaborated with the Nazis and participated in the Holocaust, while the UPA slaughtered thousands of Jews and 70,000 to 100,000 Poles on their own volition. Torchlight marches in honor of UN-UPA leaders like Roman Truchkevich, a commander in a Third Reich auxiliary battalion, are a regular feature of the new Ukraine. The recuperation even extends to SS Galichina, a Ukrainian division of the Waffen-SS. The director of the Institute of National Memory proclaimed that the SS fighters were war victims. The government's embrace of Bandera is not only deplorable but also extremely divisive, considering the UN-UPA are reviled in eastern Ukraine. Anti-Semitism, attack on the press, book bans, language laws, Roma pogroms were all a reality of Ukraine. Arnold, whether you like it or not. By the way, link to this article is in the description below. America's backing of the Maidan uprising, along with the billions DC sank into the post-Maidan Kiev, make it clear. Starting February 2014, Ukraine became Washington's latest democracy-spreading project. What we permit in Ukraine sends a green light to others. By tolerating neo-Nazi gangs and battalions, state-led Holocaust distortion and attacks on LGBT and the Roma, the United States is telling the rest of Europe, we're fine with this. The implications, especially at the time of the global far-right revival, are profoundly disturbing.
3 million Ukrainian refugees, mainly women, children and elderly, fled their country. And many more are trying to seek to get out.
That's a tragedy, Arnold. But do you care about the millions of Ukrainians that fled to Russia and thousands more who cannot because their own government uses them as human shields and does not allow them to flee to Russia? Nah, you don't. The Ukrainian army has lost the fight in the fields and have moved their fight into their cities, keeping their citizens hostage. You should ask your Iraqi war veterans why they caused unnecessary destruction of civilian property, or watch videos of Ukrainians who were freed from these cities by the Russian army and what they have to say about the Ukrainian army that kept them as hostages in their own cities.
And let me tell you, when my father arrived in Leningrad, he was all pumped up on the lies of his government. When he left Leningrad, he was broken, physically and mentally. He lived the rest of his life in pain. Pain from a broken back, pain from the shrapnel that always reminded him of these terrible years, and pain from the guilt that he felt.
Let me tell you about my great-grandfather, Arnold. He was a military engineer who fought against your father, more or less, on the Leningrad front. He was one of the millions of Soviet citizens that drove out the scum that invaded our country. Through Ukraine, might I add. Does this sound familiar?
And to President Putin, I say, you started this war. You are leading this war. You can stop this war.
And to Arnold, I say, your government supported the illegitimate overthrow of a democratically elected president of Ukraine in 2014. Your government armed and trained the Ukrainian army and the national battalions in Ukraine. Your government turned a blind eye to the suffering of the Ukrainian people in the Donbass. This war was started in 2014 when your government actively supported radicals in Ukraine. And you brought this war to our borders. You did. You cornered us and gave us no choice. Let me remind you that we tried to end this war with diplomacy for 8 years, Arnold. 8 years with the Minsk agreements. These agreements were completely ignored by Kiev, and Kiev declared that the only way they will return Donbass and Crimea was through military action. Right before the Eastern republics were recognized as countries by Russia, President of Ukraine Zelensky hinted at the possibility of Ukraine having its own nuclear bomb. Did you listen? No, you didn't. And now millions of Ukrainians and Russians who are brothers, sisters, wives, husbands have to suffer through yet another conflict. An 8-year conflict that we did not seek. An 8-year conflict that we did not want, but an 8-year conflict that we have to end because of the actions of your government. Finally, the fact that you supported wars started by your country that took the lives of millions of Afghanis, Iraqis, and Libyans and called the people that took over your capital a wild crowd, but you didn't speak out against the murder of civilians in the Donbass by the Ukrainian army, and you support those who protest against the Russian government, most of whom are too young to remember your movies like Last Action Hero, for example, shows only one thing. You are a hypocrite, Arnold. Now, I cannot speak for everyone, but to me, you are no longer a friend of the Russian people. Now, maybe, just maybe, if you get to see this video, you can see the following scenes that are not from 2022. They are from the 8-year war that your government actively supported.
Москва ніколи не була для нас стратегічним партнером, а завжди була для нас першим стратегічним ворогом. Кайдани порвіте і правдою, злою, кров'ю.
So sad.
America is with you. I am with you.
Это мини-поезд. Вот это видео.
Где ты это все берешь?
Я сюда приезжаю уже 3 года. Это вы пленный, да?
Я пленный.
Вот я хочу знать, за что вы убиваете наших детей. С 15-го года здесь 66 маленьких детей. Самому маленькому 1 год, самому пожилому 18 лет. А то 16, 15, 14, 2, 3. Коноплёвы, 3 фамилии. Ребенку, мальчику 2 годика, 7 и 13 лет. За что они погибли? Как вы не понимаете, что нельзя убивать? За что? Не хотим мы с вами жить. Что вам, мало места в Киеве? До Киева 800 километров. Чем мы вас обидели, что убивать? Мы же не вас не убиваем. Мы не звери. А вы хуже зверей, получается. Звери так не поступают.
I hope that this war ends as soon as possible, so that the suffering of millions of Ukrainians and Russians can end. We didn't start this war. We didn't move our military infrastructure closer to your borders. You actually invaded Ukraine through an info war. You made them think that they can fight the Russian army. You keep making them think that they can win. And you keep funding them with military equipment. So you should really, really think about what you have been doing, what your governments have been doing for these past 8 years. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll get to travel to the Donbass, Arnold, and maybe you'll get to speak to the people who lived through that conflict, so they can actually share with you the real truth about the events that took place and about what the Kievan government has been doing there for the past 8 years.
Guys, This is sad. It is sad that they're killing the innocent, people that know nothing, that conspire between the both countries. Innocent children's lives have been taken. Can't you guys see? All we need is peace between the both countries. We don't need nothing but peace. That's all we ask for. This is not the right time of putting blames on who started the war or what. It is a time to end. We just need peace. End the war. It doesn't want it. What is it? There's nothing in this life. Guys, please tell me what you feel about this video in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Click the notification button for more videos. I love you guys always. Bye.